San Antonio or Houston. So, well, okay. So I guess I wanted to go to San Francisco regardless. So I moved there, and then I got a job shortly after at a wholesale frame warehouse. And after a few months there, it was, believe it or not, I became manager of the warehouse. The manager they had, who was somebody almost about my age, maybe a couple of years older, he was good at the job. What he was not good at was working with people.
Right.
And they had hired people that were working under him, including myself. And they didn't like him, and he didn't like them and us. So the owners asked me if I'd be the manager, and I was there for 2 years. And during that time, I was doing drawings. I had a one room apartment with a bathroom and a small kitchen. And but at the same time, I was like, I love San Francisco. It was easy to get around. I had no car for 2 years.
Right.
Go to concerts, go to Winterland, and go to other concerts. I really had a great time with that. But I was steadily also drawing what I refer to as my chalupa drawings. And it was something that I started in graduate school. I started kind of drawing freely these chalupas, Mexican food, and looked like they were flying. And then I jokingly would tell people, because I'd seen Star Wars the year before in '77, and I thought, well, if George Lucas could make money off Star Wars, I could make money off flying chalupas. Just kind of jokingly. When I moved to San Francisco, my apartment was probably the size of this space right here to that window.
Holy cow.
And so I wasn't about to paint, because at that time I was a really messy painter. Not as messy now, but I was really messy then. And so I decided to just go to Works on Paper. Maybe the largest is 30 by 42, 44. Actually, one of the drawings that I did, kind of not at that time, but shortly after, was over there. Just came back from the show. But I did those, and I was just doing them steadily because I didn't have a lot of friends. I was getting to know people, and then a friend from Houston got fired from his job, and he asked me if he could come out and visit, and said, sure. And then he said, if he could just stay. And I said, well, there's not much room. I mean, he wanted to, roommate. And I said, well, maybe we move to another place. So we found another place to move into. And he got the small bedroom, and I got the huge bedroom. My bedroom was probably 2/3 the size of this studio.
Right.
I mean, and that's not the living room. The real living room was just as big as the studio.
Wow.
So
what neighborhood was that?
This was in the Visadero area. So we were on McAllister. McAllister ran into the Modern Art Museum in San Francisco. And we were located up by the Visadero, and that area was being gentrified.
Right.
So there was some tension. I was just being totally ignorant. But as a manager, I was getting paid well, and I had gotten him a job with the same frame warehouse. I had I think 3 or 4 people working under me at that time. And I think that was the last place I worked at. And then I got fired. And another long story, but I'm not going to go into it. But I ended up getting unemployment. And I moved over to Oakland for a while. Lived in an apartment, and actually, some friends of mine had a place behind their house, like a room, and I was there for about 2 months, and then I found a place near Berkeley. I think it was on College Avenue,
right,
just a few blocks from Berkeley, and it was just another one-room apartment. In a house with other rooms, and had a hot plate, to make food. But and then my friends that I stayed with in Oakland lent me a motorcycle, so I got around in a motorcycle. I enjoyed that. I never driven a motorcycle.
Right.
It was a little scary going across the Bay Bridge, though.
Yeah.
The wind would push you from one lane to another.
Sure.
But toward the end, I actually was wanting to show my chalupa drawings. And the chalupa drawings the reason for those drawings were that I wanted to make something more personal. The work before ended up having to come from other sources as far as imagery. Some were made up. Some were based on a book that I read in high school called Trout Fishing in America by Richard Brodigan. And that kind of inspired some of the work I did in graduate school, and it kind of continued some of that. But I wanted to do something personal. So I thought, going back to the chalupa things, I thought, well, that could be something that I can relate to, because I'm Mexican-American. Chalupas is a Mexican food. I used to work in one of my father's restaurants when we moved from Corpus to Houston, opened up restaurants. And I cooked. And so I've made chalupas. I've eaten them. And so if I'm drawing these chalupas, the metaphor could be that a chalupa is a boat. So this could be a carrier of visual information that you devour with your eyes.
Wow.
So that's how I justify that.
Right.
So as a result, I wanted to show this body of work because I wasn't showing very much at the time. And I went down to there was a restaurant on 24th Street, which is kind of more of the Mexican neighborhood.
Like the Mission?
The Mission area. And so there was a restaurant called Mi Casa, and I asked the owner, and I had been there several times before, and so I asked the owner, said, could I have a show of my work here? And I know this will not benefit you, except I can bring people to it, but I'll also buy some food for you for the reception. And he said, fine. And so we had a show, and right before that, as I was setting up, one of the people who were working at Galleria de la Raza, just down the street, just a few blocks down the street, Rene Jimenez came and saw the show, and he was just blown away by it and said, hey, I wish you had come to us. We would have shown this work. But, we'll help you with the reception. So they actually ended up helping with the reception. And they said, well, maybe we could we'll get somebody to play, guitar at the opening. And so they helped send out information about the reception. And then one of the galleries that was buying frames from the wholesale frame warehouse said, hey, I have a little space. You could have a show there of that work. So it was almost like about a month apart between those two shows. And he lived up in the Masonic area. That's where he had his frame shop. So it was two very different neighborhoods.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so I had a show of those works at both those places. And then I was asked to be in a couple of shows at Galleria de la Raza. But then I knew there was a friend of some good friends of mine from graduate school who I got to meet in New York when I would go visit New York City. And we were kind of keeping in touch. We're just kind of friends, nothing else. And she said, hey, I might have a room available if you want to come up here for, I charge you $100 a month. So I said, okay, I'll be there in September.
Wow.
So I moved there and left San Francisco, and then kept on. I was unemployment. I was on unemployment, and so every 2 weeks I had to report, and then get a check, and then every time I got a check, I went and visit friends, and I had friends in Philadelphia, in the D.C. area, in Massachusetts, and in Maine. So every couple of weeks, not every couple of weeks, but maybe once a month, I just go and visit them.
Right.
And I think the ones in Massachusetts I visited a couple of times. And I wasn't really, to be honest with you, I wasn't trying to working hard to find a job. And the reason was that the people who fired me, it was a really bad excuse. And they had fired somebody for almost no reason who was working for me. And so when I got fired when I was in New York, they appealed the unemployment, and so we had a 3-hour phone conversation with a kind of a judge, I guess, and then the judge actually said, you were justified. They didn't have any justification for firing you.
Right.
So I was able to continue my lifestyle. And then when I was not going out vacationing, so to speak, I was still doing drawings. And then I go to the museums and go to galleries. And unfortunately, I wish that I had been smarter. There was a Picasso show at the Modern that took up the whole building. And they had sold tickets out, and they said the only way you could go is get a membership. And I thought, and I was in unemployment. I thought, it was $30 for a membership, just the basic membership, and I should have done it because there hasn't been a show like that since. So, but I got to see a lot of other good shows, and then my mom called and said, they had just opened up another new restaurant, and they had sold the previous restaurants and opened up other ones, and your dad had a heart attack, and I really need your help. And I was the oldest, and almost like everybody else was still kind of in school, and so if I was going to move back, I couldn't just go back for less than 2 weeks. So I ended up moving everything, and my dad, it was a massive heart attack, and part of it is he smoked a lot and drank a lot. He stopped pretty much those things after that. And I was down there for a while, and I remember my father at the hospital said, I hope you didn't move down because of me. And at that point, I was ready to kill him. Oh my gosh. So I moved back to Houston, and the funny thing about it is it was easy to plug back into the Houston art scene. And like within a year, I was asked to be in a group show, and then I was asked to be in other shows. And it just kind of like all of a sudden, just kind of like I never left.
Right. Because
I still knew a lot of people there. And Diverse Works was a new nonprofit in '82. And somebody, William Steen, who had this other place, a gallery, I suggested I wanted to curate this show. And it was basically at that time of shows that I curate, because I've been curating since I was in undergraduate school, and that's something that I've been missing out on and talking about. But at that point, it was just my friends and I. And so I thought, well, I'll do a show of friends who are still making art, because some of my friends aren't making art anymore. And so at that point, I went to William Steen, who had this gallery downtown Houston, and he said, well, you should talk to Charles Gallagher. He's actually opened up a nonprofit. It's right on Travis Street. And because he was having the first show there. And so I talked to Charles Gallagher and said, yeah, sure. And I actually ended up curating the second show that they've had. And Diverse Works is still in existence. So that's 82. That's 38 years, 36 years. So I curated that show, and then I was asked to curate another show for Lawndale Art and Performance Center, and then they were going to pay me. Maura Kelly was the director, and so there was going to be a show called Cowboys, Cocks, and Computers. And I said, well, if you're going to pay me, I think I don't want to be part of it. I said, oh, no, you have to be part of it, because part of the reason I'm asking you is because you're an artist and I really like your work. And so I curated the Cowboy section, and it ended up being an installation, which we had, that I worked with another person, LaBeth Lammers, and we kind of worked together on the idea. And it's basically like a huge TV set that the state of Texas literally came out of the coming out of the TV, and then we had these like horses that were out of styrofoam, but they were covered. We got artists to cover them in whatever they wanted to cover them in, different materials, and then somebody came up with the idea of covering the whole state with chips, like fetal chips or something. And then we had somebody made like an oil well, and then somebody, Billy Hassel, who shows with William Campbell, and a friend of mine did some birds that were suspended, and so it became